So, today this morning we will be going through the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall as well as inguinal canal. Now, as you can see in this skeleton, these bones forms the upper and lower boundaries of the anterior abdominal wall. So, this is gyphoid process, this is costal margin. The costal margin is mainly formed by the 10th rib, and in the lower boundary we have got iliac crest, anterior superior iliac spine. This is symphysis pubis, pubic tubercle, in between pubic tubercle and symphysis pubis, pubic crest, and between pubic tubercle and anterior superior iliac spine, inguinal ligament. If we now look at the muscles of the anterior abdominal wall, if you see from anterior to posterior, mainly there are 7 or 8 layers. First is the skin. Beneath the skin, superficial fascia has 2 layers, outer Camper's fascia or fatty layer, inner Scarpa's fascia or membranous layer. Then there are 3 flat muscles you can see on each side, external oblique, internal oblique and transversus abdominis. And as you go inward, behind the 3 flat muscles, there are transversalis fascia, then parietal peritoneum. In between transversalis fascia and parietal peritoneum, there is extra peritoneal tissue. So, if you go towards the midline, on the other hand, there are 2 vertical muscles. We can see rectus abdominis, a very long, strong muscle on each side of midline and compressing the abdominal viscera, helping in flexion of the trunk also. And there is another small muscles from on each side going from pubic symphysis and going upward and extending and attached to linea alba, that is called pyramidalis. So, in total, if we count down, there are total 5 muscles, 3 on anterolaterally, external oblique, internal oblique and transversus abdominis, and on each side of midline, rectus abdominis and pyramidalis. Now, if you note very clearly, you can see that the rectus muscle is enclosed in a bag like structure, and this is called a rectus sheath. So, from the lateral aspect, as the muscle and its aponeurosis come, please note that all these 3 muscles, they are more muscle or muscle composed of muscle fiber laterally. As they come medially, they are converted into strong aponeurotic sheath to give protection, and midway between the here mid-clavicular line and midline, this aponeurosis divide among themselves. They enclose rectus abdominis muscle, forming anterior layer of rectus sheath, and here posterior layer of rectus sheath, and in between 2 layers of rectus sheath, the rectus muscle is enclosed. Now, we will go to individual muscles. So, as you can see here, if we reflect here, so this is external oblique muscle. External oblique muscle arise from lower 8 ribs, and they interdigitate with a muscle called serratus anterior and latissimus dorsi. So, if there are lower 8 ribs, 8 digitation, upper 4 interdigitate with serratus anterior and lower 4 interdigitate with latissimus dorsi. And a line from 9th costal cartilage to pubic tubercle, there are no muscle fiber, they are all aponeurosis, and these aponeurosis principally forms a ligament between anterior suprailiac spine and pubic tubercle. So, if you can see here, this is anterior suprailiac spine and this is pubic tubercle. In between these rolled down part of the external oblique aponeurosis forms inguinal ligament. So, this inguinal ligament also forms the floor of inguinal canal. Medially, after they form the rectus sheath, in between the xiphoid process and here umbilicus and down below umbilicus, both external oblique, internal oblique, they form a midline avascular raphe, and this is called linea alba. So, this linea alba is avascular, and that is why surgeons prefer this linea alba to give incisions to reach intra-abdominal contents or abdominal cavity. There are two reasons here, one avascular and second the layers are less. As you can see here, there are 8 layers. If they come here, layers are less, and that is why in emergency laparotomy they use this area or linea alba. But as the vascularity is less, post operative healing is delayed. So, external oblique is the fiber direction is downward and forward, and they are attached to inguinal ligament, linea alba, to xiphoid process, to pubic tubercle and pubic crest. After external oblique is internal oblique. As you can see, this is internal oblique. Internal oblique does not arise from upper part, they arise from the lower part. So, they arise from a fascia here called thoracolumbar fascia, and not only thoracolumbar fascia, this iliac crest, and after iliac crest they also arise from the lateral part of inguinal ligament. So, thoracolumbar fascia, iliac crest, inguinal ligament. Compared to external oblique, its fiber direction is not downward, is upward and forward, and here they form again aponeurosis attached to linea alba. Not only that, they come down here and they form a very important structure which is called conjoint tendon. So, if we see here in this part, here there is inguinal canal, and this inguinal canal opening here in superficial inguinal ring. So, this superficial inguinal ring, behind this superficial inguinal ring, this internal oblique muscle forms a very tough tendon called conjoint tendon, and not only internal oblique, transversus abdominis also take part. So, this conjoint tendon give protection from the posterior aspect of superficial inguinal ring, so that in case of hernia, whatever structure is want to come down through superficial inguinal ring, the conjoint tendon by internal oblique and transversus abdominis gives protection, and this conjoint tendon is attached to pubic crest. So, apart from this, it is also attached, as you can see, over the linea alba common with the external oblique. Now, the last muscle is transversus abdominis. In this model, we cannot see transversus abdominis. Unlike the fiber direction of external oblique downward and forward, internal oblique upward and forward, we also forgot that this internal oblique muscle, as they go upward, they, apart from linea alba, they are also attached to the last 3 ribs, that is 10th, 11th and 12th rib. So, the upper attachment is firmly anchored to 10th, 11th and 12th rib. So, transversus abdominis, as you see, is this muscle. So, they are transverse in orientation. They arise same as that of internal oblique from thoracolumbar fascia, from the iliac crest, from the inguinal ligament. They go transversely, form the linea alba, forms the rectus sheath. Here they come down and form conjoint tendon. Now, one of the important thing regarding transversus abdominis is that like internal oblique we have seen, it is attached to 10th, 11th and 12th rib. This transversus abdominis is attached to lower costal cartilages interdigitating with diaphragm. So, if we see the orientation and now we go to the action, the external oblique and internal oblique, when they contract, suppose they contract on the right side, so they will produce lateral bending. Lateral bending is like this. So, lateral bending or lateral flexion of the trunk, and if they work on the opposite side, they produce lateral rotation of the opposite side. Not only that, these external oblique and internal oblique aponeurosis, they protect anterior abdominal wall, all the viscera, they compress all the viscera. A very important function is forced expiration. That means when we cough, sneeze, vomit, we increase intra-abdominal pressure excessively, and this forced expiration is assisted by external oblique and internal oblique. Similarly, when we do forced inspiration, diaphragm going down, like passing stool, defecation, then passing urine, micturition, in case of pregnant ladies, parturition, delivery of the baby, external oblique, internal oblique plays a very important role increasing intra-abdominal pressure. External oblique, internal oblique and transversus abdominis, they are supplied by lower 5 intercostal nerve and subcostal nerve. On the other hand, transversus abdominis is a muscle. As it is transversely oriented, it gives fixity to the lumbar spine and help in flexion of the trunk. They also help in prevention of any injury to the anterior abdominal wall and help in compression. Now we will go to rectus sheath. Now this is anterior layer of rectus sheath, and as you can see, this is rectus muscle, and if you remove the rectus muscle, and then you get posterior layer of rectus sheath. So how this rectus sheath is formed? If you see the upper 2/3 and lower 1/3. In the upper 2/3, the rectus sheath is formed by two layers, anterior layer and posterior layer. The anterior layer is formed by external oblique aponeurosis joining with anterior lamina of internal oblique aponeurosis. The posterior layer of rectus sheath is formed by posterior lamina of internal oblique with transversus abdominis. So to repeat again, in the upper 2/3, anterior layer of rectus sheath is formed by external oblique and anterior lamina of internal oblique forming the anterior layer, posterior layer formed by posterior lamina of internal oblique and transversus abdominis. Now midway between umbilicus and symphysis pubis, all the layers are going anteriorly. All the layers are going anteriorly. So the rectus sheath is actually deficient posteriorly. So as all the layers goes anteriorly, midway between umbilicus and symphysis pubis, the posterior layer ends in a semilunar margin which is called arcuate line. So you can see lower part, the anterior abdominal wall is not properly supported because the rectus sheath is deficient posteriorly. The rectus muscle lies naked on the parietal peritoneum and transversalis fascia. Now through this arcuate line here, some important vessels, inferior epigastric artery and vein goes above, and superior epigastric artery and vein come down. So in between posterior layer of rectus sheath and rectus muscle lies two important blood vessels, superior epigastric and inferior epigastric arteries and veins. Remember, the neurovascular structures, the nerves and arteries, they always come from the lateral aspect they go between internal oblique and transversus abdominis. That means neurovascular plane is between internal oblique and transversus abdominis, and then they go medially. So when you give an incision on the anterior abdominal wall, these nerves which are on the lateral aspect, if they are cut also, it does not produce so much of injury, but one of the main consistency and elasticity and binding of the anterior abdominal wall is maintained strongly by rectus. So it is not advisable that you cut those nerves which are going to rectus from the lateral aspect of rectus sheath. So what we do is that we do not give incision over the linea semilunaris. Linea semilunaris is on the lateral margin of rectus abdominis. We give paramedian incision in the middle of rectus sheath, then we reflect anterior layer. We now pull the rectus muscle from medial to the lateral, so that we do not want to injure the nerves here. Medial to lateral, do not cut rectus, it reflect medial to lateral, and then we cut the posterior layer of rectus sheath, and then we go to incise the peritoneum to go see the intra-abdominal content. So remember that during emergency surgery we give incision over the linea alba. Most of the planned surgery we give paramedian incision, first skin, superficial fascia together, and then after skin and superficial fascia we incise anterior layer of rectus sheath. We reflect the rectus towards the lateral aspect not to injure the nerves, and then we incise the posterior layer of rectus sheath and parietal peritoneum, then we enter the intra-abdominal contents. Now the rectus muscle, like the external oblique and internal oblique, is also supplied by the lower 5 intercostal and subcostal nerve. They play a very important role in compression and prevention of injury to the intra-abdominal content. They also play a very important role in flexion of the trunk. Now coming to the inguinal canal. Inguinal canal is prominent in male mainly because the testis descends from the posterior abdominal wall along the in between these muscles, and they come down through the superficial inguinal ring and then it go inside the scrotal sac. So descent of testis produce a cleft between the anterior abdominal wall muscle forming inguinal canal. So inguinal canal is 4 centimeter long, lying over the medial aspect of inguinal ligament. So floor is formed by inguinal ligament. In the anterior wall there are skin, superficial fascia, external oblique aponeurosis, but external oblique aponeurosis is strengthened on the lateral aspect by internal oblique muscle also. Posteriorly it is lying solely on transversalis fascia, and this transversalis fascia is strengthened by conjoint tendon on the medial aspect behind superficial inguinal ring. So posterior layer mainly by fossa transversalis and parietal peritoneum. Inferiorly we already seen inguinal canal, and anteriorly skin, superficial fascia, external oblique aponeurosis, and lateral aspect inguinal internal oblique. But remember, this internal oblique and transversus abdominis, they form another thing. They form a arch-like structure forming the roof of inguinal canal. So whenever you take deep inspiration, this internal oblique and transversus abdominis come down and make the inguinal canal minimum. So they come down as a shutter and they obstruct inguinal canal, give strength to the inguinal canal. And another thing we already found, that the superficial inguinal ring is protected by conjoint tendon. Now when the abdominal structure want to come through this inguinal canal and form inguinal hernia, they most commonly come through a deficiency in here, and so this deficiency is called internal inguinal ring. So internal inguinal ring is a deficiency in transversalis fascia, and it is actually mid-inguinal point, that means anterior suprailiac spine to symphysis pubis. From mid-inguinal point, if you go 1.25 centimeter above, you get deep inguinal ring. Superficial inguinal ring is just above the pubic crest. Normally, the spermatic cord come out along with the vas deferens, but both indirect and direct inguinal hernia comes out through superficial inguinal ring. Now we will look at how the direct and indirect inguinal hernia happens. Medial to the deep inguinal ring, so this is deep inguinal ring and medial. So medial to the deep inguinal ring, you can see inferior epigastric artery and inferior epigastric vein. So between inferior epigastric artery and inferior epigastric vein and lateral border of the rectus abdominis and inguinal ligament, if you imagine a triangle, and this triangle is called Hasselbalch's triangle. So any abdominal content coming out through weakness of this area, Hasselbalch's triangle, will produce a popping up of a swelling on the medial part of inguinal canal and then come out through the superficial inguinal ring. This type of hernia is called direct inguinal hernia. So direct inguinal hernia mostly happen in elderly when the muscles are becoming lax and loose due to the elderly or aged problem or any other metabolic disease and all. Now the causation of indirect inguinal hernia is not found in adult. So children in whom the peritoneal sac does not obliterate. This peritoneal sac is called processus vaginalis, which is actually formed due to descent of the testis. So if this processus vaginalis remain intact, so from the deep inguinal ring, the intra-abdominal content enter like omentum or viscera, and they enter and they go from deep inguinal ring, inguinal canal, superficial inguinal ring, and then they enter scrotal sac. So this is called indirect inguinal hernia. So indirect inguinal hernia we get in usually in around 16-18 year of age, or even in early childhood, where the processus vaginalis is not obliterated, intact. So increased intra-abdominal pressure allow the intra-abdominal content to come out through deep inguinal ring, inguinal canal, and through the superficial inguinal ring they enter the scrotal sac.